My first time diving in Cuba was unforgettable. I was able to get up close to a hawksbill turtle. Later, my astonishment was deepened when I was able to go on a diving trip in Indonesia and come face to face with this huge manta ray, its wings expanding 30 feet. In Palau, I marveled at the intricate beauty of a chambered nautilus. This living fossil has been around for the past 500 million years, preceding the dinosaurs. Now, these experiences impacted me, leaving a greater empathy towards the species that I encountered. What was amazing was that I was able to visit Palau, Cuba, and Indonesia, all in the span of 10 minutes. Now, how was I able to do that? Well, you may have guessed, through virtual reality. So, virtual reality has the ability to create presence, which makes us feel immersed in the experience. And presence powers empathy. And empathy is seen as a critical factor in promoting conservation and feeling that connection with nature. And so this could be beneficial to the 3 species I mentioned on my virtual dive, because they are among the 10 marine species that are at risk of extinction. And although it's important to protect all endangered species, there's a bias towards funding recovery efforts towards those that are more charismatic or charming than those that are more unusual or uncharismatic. And so how can we get people invested in marine conservation issues to help those that are also these more unusual or uncharismatic species like the abalone shown here? Well, studies show that empathy can be nurtured and that virtual reality is a powerful tool that can build ocean empathy. Well, what is empathy? So empathy has many dimensions. Many researchers classify it into 3 different components: emotional, cognitive, and compassionate empathy. But generally, as you may know, empathy is the ability to feel or relate to someone's emotions or perspective. How can we study empathy? Well, empathy, a lot of researchers use self-reported measures, so this is questionnaires. Neuroscience looks at something called mirror neurons. Mirror neuron is located in your sensory motor cortex, which is the central part of your brain that is responsible for planning, control, and execution of voluntary movements. So you may be asking at this point, well, how does mirror neurons relate to empathy? Or even better, what the heck are mirror neurons? Well, to better explain, I like to take the example of a lemon. Do you recall the last time you ate acidic, sour, yet juicy lemon? Perhaps it resembled something like the baby in this video. Well, so how does this relate to empathy? So just by watching a video of someone eating a lemon or someone talking about eating a lemon, it helps us understand the perspective of the person eating it. So for example, we can feel some aspect of what the baby is feeling in this video because we have felt similar reactions. And so this is due to something called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are fascinating cells in your brain that fire not only when we perform an action, but also when we observe someone performing an action. So this is the social part of our brain that lets us feel what others are feeling, such as when someone slams their finger in a car door or when we watch someone eating a lemon. And so there are a lot of research on empathy. However, there's a gap in research of empathy towards marine species. And so this was what I was interested in. And some of the questions that I looked at is there an empathic response towards marine species? If there is there a difference between this charismatic and uncharismatic species? And then lastly, I was curious about self-reported measures of empathy. So during when people fill out questionnaires about their own empathy, how does that relate to these brain measures of empathy? And for the purpose of today, I'll be talking more about the first 2. And so there were 14 participants that were part of this study that was approved by the Institutional Review Board. And this study is using an electroencephalogram, or EEG, to measure the brainwave activity. And typically for these type of studies, there's usually about 20 participants. And so this has 5 conditions to this study. So One of them was the resting state, I feel like, and then action execution, and then action observation, which was 3 virtual reality 360 videos. One was of a human, one was of a sea slug, and one was of a sea turtle. And so these were a duration of 3 minutes each, and during that duration, we were measuring the brainwave activity. And also there were questionnaires that were filled out in 3 parts at the beginning of the study, and then after the first marine species of the sea slug, and then after the last marine species, the sea turtle. And so this is a picture of me happily testing it out before trying it on participants. Despite what it may look like, there was no harm done in this experiment. That's a syringe that has gel before the electrodes are placed. And this is Nicole, lab manager, who was putting the gel, and later on the picture of the right is the electrodes being placed. And so the picture on the top here are still shots of those 360 videos that was used in the virtual reality. So the left is a human dancing flamenco, in the middle is a sea slug, and then on the right is a sea turtle. And below are pictures of the actual participants during the study. So we have someone at the left that's looking at the sea turtle, and on the computer that's kind of what they're seeing, if you can see kind of back there, their point of view. So it was focused on the species, and on the right is the sea slug. Now, I talked about mirror neurons, so how exactly do we measure mirror neurons? So it's something called mu suppression, which is a decrease or suppression of mu rhythm, which is a brain wave frequency that is said to be between 8 to 13 hertz. And so on the left here are those, is a picture of what we were collecting from those electrodes. And so the top right is the segment of that, so one of those channels of the electrodes. And so what you see on the left of the blue line on the top, not good with the clicker. So on the left of the blue line with the mu is the mu rhythm. So this is between the 8 to 13 hertz. And then to the right of the blue line is the suppression, or the decrease of that mu rhythm. So that was what I was measuring, is that suppression. And so this is the result of the average of the mu power for the 14 participants. And so essentially, the more negative the number, the more mu suppression, which is reflective of empathic responses. So you can see for sea turtle, we had more empathic responses, the participants, than humans in sea slug, and the sea slug had the least amount of empathic responses. And using a one-tailed paired t-test, there was a significant difference between the sea slug and sea turtle of the average for the mu power. I also looked at 6 different measurements through self-reported questionnaires. I'm just going to talk about one today. So this was a questionnaire about attitudes and knowledge towards the species. This was on a 6-point scale, so the higher to 6 it was, the more likely they felt that the species was attractive or dangerous. So they were asked this before the virtual reality videos, and then they were asked it after each marine species. This one was interesting because out of the 14 participants, only 9 completed it, and a lot of that was due to unfamiliarity with the sea slug. So a lot of them didn't know what a sea slug was before watching the video. And so just a couple that I was going to point out is attractiveness. So for the sea slug and sea turtle, both the attractiveness increased after watching the virtual reality video, and also the familiarity with the species. So just within a 3-minute video, there was no audio, they felt more familiar and found the species to be more attractive. Although these, it was a small sample size, so they weren't statistically significant, there was a statistically significant difference between the attractiveness of the sea slug and the difference between the sea turtle. For sake of time, I'm going to skip over that one. So just concluding, this study, was Interesting to me because it showed that we do have this mirror neuron or empathic responses to our marine species in a way that is comparable to humans. It did show that we do have more of it towards the sea turtles, which we find them more charismatic, and it could be also because we are more familiar or think they're more attractive than a sea slug. And then also, VR can be a powerful tool that can create empathy, change perceptions, and changing emotions. So I believe that virtual reality, or tools like virtual reality, can help create this wave of support to increase empathy towards marine species, including these unusual creatures. So speaking of empathy, all these people had a huge amount of empathy towards me. It's a huge undertaking. And so I just want to thank my committee, Dr. Ying Wu, Dr. Danny Pimentel, and Dr. Greg Rouse, and then also Nicole, Enrique, and Dr. Jung. This wouldn't have been possible without their help, especially Nicole and Enrique helped me with running the experiment. My cohort too, I had a lot of people that were helping become participants and trying it out, and also Anna for getting half the recruitment of the participants, and my parents' daughters, family, and friends. My daughter who always does my hair and lets me borrow her clothes, like the dress today. So I just, and a lot of other people, my PhD mentor, Allison, and even Noah, who let me, I was experimenting what uncharismatic species to use, so I was in there filming about the abalone, and Callie Turner has also been really helpful. So that is it. Thanks. Any questions?
I'll kick it off. I've got a question. So, Elena, wonderful presentation. You mentioned you had other self-reported questionnaires. Did you find any significance with any of the other measures as well?
What a great question, Samantha. Oh. Well, yeah, so this is another measurement that looks at emotion. And so it was looking at a negative and positive emotion. So some of the positive emotions are like excited. A negative emotion was if you're nervous or jittery. And so for both of the sea turtle and sea slug, they decreased, which means kind of the experience was a little bit more calming or mellow. And there was significant decrease with the sea slug for the positive emotion of this scale.
Great job. I was curious if you're planning on continuing this at all, and if so, what other species might you consider looking at?
Yeah, so I think further research, it'd be interesting to have a broader spectrum of marine species to see what empathy we have towards a lot of other species. I would love to do more research on it. Gotta look for grant funding, but it sounds promising, and hopefully to talk to Dr. Ying Wu, who's there, and can look at potential opportunities. Just to see the difference of, even using abalone, if we can get abalone and other creatures that we consider more charismatic. And there have been studies that have looked at it, but just not on studying brainwave activity. So it'd be interesting to use those studies to be able to select which species would be best.
What do you see as a potential practical application of these?
Well, so I think it could be used, and it has been used recently within virtual reality. So to me, it would be interesting, because this was just a video without any audio. A lot of studies also use the component of storytelling, and we're going to hear a lot about storytelling today, because if you couple that with virtual reality, I think it could be a powerful tool that could be used, potentially in schools. If you use it one time, I don't think it has as big of an impact. But if you use it as part of a curriculum, I think it could be something that could be a powerful tool to get people more interested and empathetic towards these creatures that could lead to potential action.
And Elena, we just have time for one more question. It's from the WhatsApp chat. What led you to choose the sea slug as the foil to the sea turtle?
Well, honestly, it was hard to find a video of an uncharismatic species. So that's why I was experimenting. I was trying to take a video of abalone. And it's kind of just goes to the point of the study that they're kind of underfunded, not a lot of money goes into it. And so it was basically the video that I could come across that was different from us and considered, further related to the human and considered more uncharismatic. And so that's why I ended up with the sea slug. Great. Thank you.